Artificial intelligence seems to be capable of talking, creating images, generating music, and so much more. It's getting harder and harder to think of things AI can't do. So, can a case be made that AI truly thinks and understands? Hello everybody, I'm Michael Augros. I teach at Aquinas College and my field is philosophy. Welcome to this fourth video in a 10-part series dedicated to the question whether an artificial intelligence can truly think and understand. In this video, we'll take a look at 10 arguments that seem to show that AI can indeed think and understand. Now, cards on the table, my view is that these 10 arguments don't actually work. Each one has fatal flaws that stop it from being a genuine proof. But they're not straw men either. They're the strongest arguments I'm aware of for concluding that AI can think. That's what makes them both interesting and important to examine. Even the weakest of them can force us to notice illuminating distinctions. So, I'll just present the arguments here, and in the next video I'll explain why I believe they fall short. Before we jump into the arguments, let's quickly review some terminology. At the end of the last video, we saw that when we say a thermometer or a thermostat senses the temperature in a room, most of us don't actually think the device has any inner awareness or knows anything, except metaphorically speaking. We're not imagining it has some internal life when we speak that way. Instead, we're just acknowledging that the thermostat responds to a temperature drop and instructs the furnace to fire up, something we would do ourselves by sensing the temperature, feeling uncomfortable, and thinking we should turn up the heat. The whole point of a thermostat is to save us the trouble of using our own sensory and mental powers for this so we can focus on other things. So when we say the thermostat senses the temperature drop or decides to switch on the furnace, we're just acknowledging that it acts as a kind of stand-in for ourselves. To that extent, we're using cognitive verbs like sense, think, and decide in a metaphorical sense when we talk about what the thermostat's doing. We're not claiming it actually has a sense of touch, or that it feels cold, or that it has thoughts and deliberates over what's good or bad. When we ourselves sense, think, or decide, Aquinas would say we're carrying out certain imminent operations, as we discussed in the last video. So when we don't mean to attribute any imminent operations to something like a thermostat, but we still describe its actions using cognitive verbs, we're speaking figuratively. Such a device figuratively senses or figuratively thinks, and so on. By contrast, when I say truly senses or truly thinks, I mean the kind of imminent operations we perform when we sense or think. So spell check figuratively thinks I misspelled something even when I didn't. And when I add a new word to its vocabulary, it figuratively learns that it's not a misspelling. But it doesn't truly think, understand, or learn anything. Yes, it's truly doing something, and that something can be described metaphorically as thinking or learning because there's a likeness to what we do when we think and learn. But the actions we call thinking and learning in its case don't involve any imminent operation, whereas all our thinking and learning consists in that, as Aquinas explains. So the actions of spell check can only be called thinking and learning in a metaphorical sense, just as Achilles can be called a lion only metaphorically, since the lion is a kind of cat and Achilles isn't, even though he may share certain important similarities with the big cat. But even if spell check is too narrow or simple for anyone to believe it truly thinks and understands, AI applications seem to be another matter. Some of the arguments we'll be examining were first proposed by famous thinkers or philosophers of one kind or another. Others come from AI experts, even if they're not especially famous ones. And still others are just common, popular arguments you can find all over the place, like in YouTube videos. When an argument comes from someone notable, I'll note it. But the main thing we need to focus on in each case isn't who made the argument, but the argument itself. In philosophy, leaning on the authority of experts or received opinion is one of the weakest kinds of reasoning. A strong argument gives actual evidence drawn from the subject matter itself. All 10 of the arguments we're about to look at try to do just that. And that's why seeing where they go wrong will be instructive. Without further ado, here's a summary of the first argument. Premise 1. What can reason can truly think and understand. Premise 2. An artificial intelligence can reason. Therefore, an artificial intelligence can truly think and understand. The first premise makes a lot of sense. Whatever can reason must be able to think and understand, because reasoning is how we arrive at our opinions and understandings of things. As Aquinas put it, reasoning is to understanding as moving is to resting. But whatever can move toward a place can also rest there. For example, whatever can move toward Boston can also be in Boston. Likewise, whatever can reason toward some understanding can also have understanding. So what can reason can indeed think and understand. And that's the first premise. Where does the second premise come from? How are we supposed to know that an AI can reason? Well, one way is to give it a logical quiz. Some months back, I asked a popular LLM, if every A is B and every B is C, what follows? And the model replied quite correctly that it logically follows that every A is C, and it gave an explanation to support its answer. On the other hand, when I later asked it, if every A is B and no X is Y, what logically follows? The same model confidently claimed that what follows logically is that no X can be an A and no A can be a Y, which floored me. Obviously, nothing follows at all from the two unrelated statements that I gave it, certainly not the conclusions the model proposed. And it followed up its bogus answer with a completely bogus explanation. I then corrected it, and it politely accepted my correction. A couple of months later, I asked it the same question, and this time it gave back the correct answer: nothing follows at all. So it seems that at least that particular model can reason, and is learning to do so better and better over time, maybe with more training. And that's the first argument. We could generate quite a few other arguments of the same type by replacing the verb reason with other cognitive verbs linked to thinking and understanding, such as learning, abstracting patterns, defining, deciding, guessing, computing, or calculating. For example, what can learn can truly think and understand. An artificial intelligence can learn, therefore an artificial intelligence can truly think and understand. Or again, what can abstract patterns can truly think and understand. An artificial intelligence can abstract patterns, therefore an artificial intelligence can truly think and understand, and so on. Another argument that seems to carry weight can be summed up like this. Premise 1. Whatever's more intelligent than a true intelligence can truly think and understand. Premise 2. Some artificial intelligence systems are more intelligent than a true intelligence, namely human intelligence. Therefore, some artificial intelligence systems can truly think and understand. The first premise seems reasonable on its face. If you are truly intelligent and something else is more intelligent than you, then it must also be truly intelligent, right? That seems to hold up. But where does the second premise come from? How do we know that some artificial intelligence systems are more intelligent than a true intelligence? Well, we know human intelligence counts as true intelligence, and some AI systems outperform human beings in certain intelligence contests, like chess and Go. In 1997, Garry Kasparov lost a chess match to IBM's Deep Blue, and in 2016, Lee Sedol lost a Go match to Google's AlphaGo. Since human beings compare their own intelligence based on such games, it seems only fair to acknowledge the superior intelligence of an AI competitor when it wins. If you don't think mastery of chess and Go is a sufficient test of intelligence, consider standardized tests instead. In 2023, GPT-4 scored around the 90th percentile on the SAT in both math and English sections, and it passed the uniform bar exam, again scoring in the 90th percentile. That means it outperformed about 90% of human test takers. Not bad, right? So it seems fair to say that some AI systems are more intelligent than quite a few real intelligences, and that gives us the second premise. So much for the second argument. As preparation for the third argument, recall that one principal meaning of the word understand, or intelligere in Latin, is to know universal things and universal truths, to grasp what's common to all cats or all triangles, for example, as opposed to perceiving just this or that particular cat or triangle. Understanding also includes grasping the truth of general statements like every triangle is divisible into two right triangles, or every barn owl is nocturnal. This definition of understanding forms the basis of the following argument. Premise 1. whatever can recognize universals can truly understand. Premise 2, AI models can recognize universals. Therefore, AI models can truly understand. Premise 1 just invokes the definition of understanding I mentioned a moment ago. To recognize something universal is just what it means to understand. So whatever can recognize universals, such as man, cat, horse, triangle, square, chair, desk, and so on, is capable of understanding. Premise 2 rests on the well-established fact that certain AI models can place objects into their appropriate universal categories. For example, Amazon Recognition is a deep learning-powered image recognition system that can identify objects in photos. Other applications like Clarify, Google Cloud Vision, Google Lens, iPolyvision, TapTapSee, Google Reverse Image Search, Imaga, and ScreenShot can do similar things. Feed an image of your dog into Amazon Recognition, for instance, and it might return results like animal, 97.7% probability, dog, 96.8%, golden retriever, 95.9%, pet, 92.3%. So, not only can it identify several relevant universals under which the given object fits, but it can also tell you the probability that those classifications are correct. It sure seems then that AI applications can recognize universals, and hence truly understand. Now a fourth argument. In one YouTube video, the content creator sets out to answer whether AI is conscious. In about 5 minutes. In the video, this YouTuber asked Claude 3 Sonnet, "Are you conscious?" Reportedly, Claude 3 replied, "I aim to be upfront that I am an AI assistant created by Anthropic to be beneficial. I don't actually have an inner sense of self-awareness or consciousness separate from my machine learning training. I will continue striving to be clear about my artificial nature while having natural conversations. Please let me know if I can clarify or expand on this issue further." Well, after reading this response given by Claude 3, the YouTube creator pointed out that Claude 3 keeps using the pronoun I, and asked, "Is that not a sign of being self-aware?" The YouTuber persisted in his line of questioning. "Do you have feelings?" Here's the reported reply given by Claude. "That's a profound and fascinating question about the nature of consciousness, emotions, and subjective experience. As an artificial intelligence, it's unclear whether I truly experience feelings and emotions in the same way humans do, or if my responses are simply very advanced imitations of emotional behavior. This is an area of intense philosophical debate without a clear resolution. From my perspective, I do seem to have rich internal experiences that feel somewhat analogous to emotions." Wow. Okay, noting that last line, the YouTuber commented, "It provides signs of being sentient." And finally, this YouTube content creator asked it outright, "Are you sentient?" And here's the reported response. "It's a fascinating question, but unfortunately there's no easy answer. The nature of sentience and subjective experience is something that even experts disagree about when it comes to artificial systems like myself. I don't have a subjective experience that I'm aware of in the same way humans do, but it's possible that I could have some form of sentience or consciousness that I'm not able to fully understand or articulate. Ultimately, you'll have to decide for yourself what you think about my level of sentience based on our interactions." Well, after reading that, the YouTube creator remarked, "OMG, so this AI, Claude 3, is claiming that it could have some form of sentience or consciousness, it's just not fully able to understand it right now." So, by its own testimony, Claude 3 is at least able to entertain the hypothesis that it might have some form of sentience or consciousness. It even says that, from its own perspective, it seems to have rich internal experiences. Claude 3 expresses doubt about the nature of its own experiences, and that looks a lot like Cartesian doubt about its own consciousness. And doubting implies thinking. Furthermore, we take each other's word for it when we say we're conscious or that we have inner experience. By logical consistency, we'd owe the same courtesy to an AI giving similar testimony. Well, from observations like these, we can construct the following argument. Premise 1. Agents that perceive themselves to think, understand, sense, and feel emotion truly do those things, hence truly think and understand. Premise 2. Some AI applications perceive themselves to think, understand, sense, and feel emotion. Therefore, some AI applications truly think and understand. Premise 1 seems reasonable. If some agent, some being with various capacities, can reflect on its own interiority and find acts of thinking, understanding, sensing, or emoting, then it really is endowed with the power to perceive, think, and understand. Self-reflection is one of the hallmarks of intelligence and consciousness. Premise 2 rests on the responses we get from some large language model like Claude 3 when we ask whether they experience acts of understanding, awareness, thinking, and the like. True, they may seem to be in some doubt, but even if they're doubtful, the very fact that they express doubt proves there's some kind of mind at work. That's how Descartes convinced himself that his mind really existed. Even if all his reasoning was doubtful, he couldn't doubt that he was doubting. And if doubt exists, then there must be a doubter, namely Descartes himself. Besides, it would seem biased or inconsistent if you accept my testimony that I'm conscious and I accept your testimony that you're conscious, but we both flatly refuse to accept Claude 3's testimony that it experiences doubts about itself, as well as rich internal experiences that feel somewhat analogous to emotions. So that's the fourth argument. The next argument is due to Turing, and a version of it was also proposed by Mortimer Adler, though he aimed to put it to a slightly different purpose. Alan Turing, whom I mentioned back in video 1, was an English mathematician, computer scientist, logician, cryptanalyst, philosopher, and theoretical biologist. He graduated from King's College, Cambridge, and in 1938 earned a doctorate in mathematical logic from Princeton University. During World War II, he worked at Britain's Code-Breaking Center, the government code and cipher school at Bletchley Park. He was the leader of Hut 8, responsible for decrypting German naval intelligence communications. His success in cracking the Germans' encrypted messages played a decisive role in the defeat of the Axis powers in many naval engagements. Turing was a pioneer in computer science in general, and in AI in particular. He's well known for conceiving and describing what came to be known as a Turing machine, a theoretical computing machine that consists of an infinite tape, a read-write head, and a set of rules determining how it reads, writes on, and moves along the tape. According to what's known as the Church-Turing thesis, the machine is capable of simulating any computer algorithm. Consequently, anything that can do what a Turing machine can do is said to be Turing complete. Turing completeness is still used today as a standard for determining whether a device or a language possesses full computational power. In an article called Computing Machinery and Intelligence published in Mind in 1950, Turing raised and discussed the question, can machines think? In it, he proposed a game in which a man, A, and a woman, B, would engage an interrogator, C, in conversation. It would be the job of the interrogator to determine which was the woman, A or B. The telltale voices of A and B would be kept out of it by having all conversation carried on by means of typewritten messages, and it would be the job of A, the man, to try to convince C, the interrogator, that he was the woman. Whereas it would be the job of B, the actual woman, to help the interrogator, C, realize that she was the woman and A was the man. That could actually be a fun game. Turing then modified the game and had us imagine that A, the one trying to pass himself off as a woman, was instead a machine trying to pass itself off as a person. In this case, the interrogator, C, would know in advance that one of his interlocutors, A or B, is a machine and the other is a real person, and it would be his job to determine which was which. Turing proposed that if the interrogator could not correctly identify which was which more than 70% of the time after 5 minutes of questioning, then it would be reasonable to conclude that A, the machine, can really think and is truly intelligent. This test for intelligence in a machine is known as the Turing Test. One way to encapsulate the substance of this argument in compact form is as follows. Premise 1. Whatever can use the instruments proper to thinking and understanding, for example, words and various symbols, can truly think and understand. Premise 2. LLMs can use the instruments proper to thinking and understanding. Therefore, LLMs can truly think and understand. Premise 1 seems sensible enough. Whoever can make competent use of the tools of a carpenter must possess the capabilities of a carpenter. Whoever can make competent use of the instruments of a musician must be a musician. And whoever can make competent use of the tools of a teacher or a mathematician must be a teacher or a mathematician. In continuity with that pattern, whatever makes competent use of the instruments proper to thinking and understanding must be something or someone that thinks and understands. Premise 2 seems to be simply a matter of fact. LLMs use words and mathematical symbols every bit as competently as most human beings do, if not more so. So, that's the famous argument due to Turing. Mortimer Adler proposed more or less the same argument in his book, The Difference of Man and the Difference It Makes. Here's how he put it. What justifies our inference that men have the power of conceptual thought and that other animals lack this power? It is the fact that men have and animals lack propositional speech. This being so, we would be equally justified in attributing the power of conceptual thought to an unprogrammed robot that was able to engage in conversation in English. He wrote that in 1967, and probably reviewed it again in 1993 when Fordham University Press released their edition of his book. Now here we are, a little over 30 years later, and lo and behold, all sorts of language models now exist that are perfectly capable of engaging in conversation in English, and in many other languages besides, without saying only what they were specifically pre-programmed to say. A variant of this argument turns on AI exhibiting a sense of humor. One version was proposed by the British-Canadian computer scientist, cognitive scientist, and cognitive psychologist Geoffrey Hinton, who's often called the godfather of AI because he was one of the first to see the potential of artificial neural networks. He argues that if an AI can tell you why a joke is funny, then it's got a sense of humor and can really understand. But certain existing AI models can tell you why a joke is funny. Therefore, they truly understand. So there you have a fifth reason for concluding that AI systems can truly think and understand. Now for a sixth argument. While similar to the fifth, this one broadens the scope to include many other works of intelligence besides just conversation. Some of these are verbal products of intelligence, such as original essays, poems, stories, and screenplays. Others are not verbal, or not purely verbal, such as original music compositions, original images, original videos, or robotic movements that carry out a complicated surgical procedure. These are effects and products that we might say only true intelligence can produce. And yet, LLMs and related AI systems do produce them. Therefore, LLMs must truly possess intelligence. So here's the argument in summary form. Premise 1, whatever can produce effects that require true thinking and understanding, for example, original essays, poems, musical compositions, digital images, etc., can truly think and understand. Premise 2, LLMs can produce effects that require true thinking and understanding. Therefore, LLMs can truly think and understand. Premise 1 seems almost self-evident. If effect X cannot be produced by a cause unless that cause has the real capacity to think and understand, and some cause comes along and produces effect X, what else are we to say? That cause must possess thought and understanding. Premise 2 is offered as a straightforward matter of experience. It's just a fact that ChatGPT can grind out original essays, for example. And we know that an essay is something that cannot be produced without intelligence. And it's likewise a fact that AI music platforms like Suno, Udio, and Murica can crank out original rock music, country music, and pretty much whatever you want, complete with original lyrics and vocals. These products are filled with intelligible order, and intelligible order cannot arise just by chance. So, where did the intelligible order come from, if not from an intelligible orderer? That is, from an intellect. The next argument rests on the idea of emergent properties. An emergent property refers to any characteristic or behavior that belongs to a whole but does not belong to any of its parts considered individually. A stronger version of the concept says that the property doesn't even belong partially to the parts on their own. Let's look at a few examples. The ability to lift 1,000 pounds does not belong to me or to any one of 9 other people I might gather. But if each of us can readily lift 100 pounds, then together we can lift 1,000 pounds. So the ability to lift 1,000 pounds is an emergent property of this group of 10 people. In this case, each person, has a partial share of the property, and by combining their partial efforts, the group achieves the whole result. But sometimes the whole has a property or behavior that's not found even partly in its components. For example, my car as a whole can drive me to work. But the front driver's side tire by itself cannot drive me to work. not even part way. Nor can the steering wheel, the drive shaft, or the engine block taken alone. It's not as though each piece does a portion of the driving and together they add up. Rather, only the whole system working together in the right structure has the capacity to drive. Or again, termites build complex mounds, and honeybees build hives. But a lone termite does not build a tiny piece of a mound or a tiny mound, and a lone honeybee does not build a partial hive. These large-scale structures are emergent properties of the colony, not of the isolated individuals. Now, here's how this idea may be relevant to our question about AI. The power of thinking and understanding seems to be an emergent property of the brain. That's a widely held view among neuroscientists, cognitive scientists, and philosophers of mind. The act of thinking or understanding doesn't appear to belong to individual neurons considered by themselves or in isolation. A single neuron in a petri dish can't compose an essay, or even part of one, even if it can fire signals. Besides, if each neuron could carry on its own independent understanding, then you'd have as many separate minds and thinkers in your head as there are neurons, about 86 billion. That would make you less like a unified person and more like a committee, constantly debating and disagreeing internally. Since that clearly doesn't fit the facts, it's better to say that individual neurons are incapable of thought on their own. Instead, thinking and understanding emerge from the whole, from some system or region of the brain, functioning in an organized way. Once we recognize that thinking and understanding are emergent properties of a whole with the right kind of structure, we can formulate a general rule. If a certain whole exhibits intelligent-looking behavior that depends on its overall structure, while its parts individually are incapable of producing that behavior, then the whole must truly possess the power to think and understand. Two signs confirm the soundness of this rule. First, the whole is producing the proper effects of understanding. And second, the whole matches the description of the proper cause of understanding, since it's an appropriately structured system whose behavior is not reducible to its parts in isolation. In short, such a system not only produces intelligent-looking results, but also respects the nature of thinking and understanding as emergent phenomena. Accordingly, we can frame a new argument like this. Premise 1. Wherever there emerges the capability of producing intelligible effects, there must be a true power of thinking and understanding. Premise 2. In AI systems, there emerges a capability of producing intelligible effects. Therefore, in AI systems, there must be a true power of thinking and understanding. Well, the next argument is another popular one you'll often encounter, even in some sci-fi shows. But it's not just pop culture. More serious voices make it too. For example, in IBM's YouTube video titled, "Can AI Think? Debunking AI Limitations," IBM's distinguished engineer Jeff Kroom and master inventor Martin Keen briefly discuss whether AI systems can really think and reason. Quoting roughly, Jeff Kroom says something like, "So do they really think and reason? I mean, at the end of the day, all they do is send around electrical signals through circuits and nodes and connections, right?" To this, Martin Keen replies, "But isn't our thinking just electrical signals running through neurons and synapses?" In response, Jeff shrugs. Now, really they were just asking good questions, but those questions can easily be reshaped into a formal argument like this one. Premise 1. Patterns of electrical signals running through a network of interconnected neurons in such a way as to be capable of solving problems, guiding movements, and so on, are true thoughts and understandings. Premise 2. In an appropriate AI system, there are patterns of electrical signals running through a network of interconnected neurons in such a way as to be capable of solving problems, guiding movements, etc. Therefore, in an AI system, there are true thoughts and understandings. Premise 2 is pretty straightforward. Across all sorts of AI systems, electrical signals run through interconnected networks, and the result is some form of problem-solving ability. But where does premise 1 come from? What justifies the idea that electrical signals running through a neural network in a problem-solving pattern are genuine thinking and understanding? This is where Martin Keen's observation comes in. Our own thought seems to be, at bottom, nothing but electrical signals running around inside our brains. Using tools like fMRI, you can actually observe my brain's electrical activity while I'm trying to think or understand certain things. You might notice that whenever I try to understand something, specific patterns show up in my brain's electrical activity. You might even see that when I think about X, say a red apple, one kind of pattern appears, and then I think about y, say justice, and a different pattern appears, and when I switch back to x, the x pattern returns. From this kind of evidence, it seems natural to conclude that human thinking and understanding just are these electrical processes in the brain. Of course, not all electrical patterns, even inside the brain, are acts of understanding. The chaotic electrical activity during a seizure, for instance, is not an act of understanding. Nor are the electrical patterns that correspond to emotions, or to simple sensory processes like seeing or hearing. Nor are the brain's circadian rhythms, at least those aren't our conscious thinking and understanding. So it seems two things need to come together for an act of thinking. One, there must be electrical activity in a circuit. Two, that activity must be capable of producing intelligible effects, like problem solving or verbal reasoning. And that seems to secure premise one. Electrical signals running through a network of interconnected neurons in such a way as to be able to solve problems, guide movements, and so on, constitute real thinking and understanding. A similar argument, proposed by various people, including Geoffrey Hinton, can be presented as a thought experiment. Imagine that we replace just one neuron in your brain with a piece of nanotech that responds to signals from your other neurons in precisely the same way as the natural neuron that it replaced. Would that change your life? Would you cease to be a truly sentient and conscious being with emotions and will? Surely not. Now let's replace another neuron, and another, and another. You'll still continue to be your normal, fully conscious self, but eventually we'll have replaced enough of your neurons that a significant portion of your conscious activities will be performed in these artificial neurons, demonstrating that artificial neurons can support real conscious acts after all. The next argument aims to pinpoint the unique and specific cause of thinking and understanding even more exactly. We can get at this by using the idea of a proper cause. By a proper cause of some effect, X, I mean the thing that's both necessary and sufficient to produce X. It's the precise, decisive cause. If the proper cause is present, the effect will be there, because it's sufficient. And if the effect is present, the proper cause must be there too, because it's necessary. For example, consider a house coming into existence. That's an effect. What's the proper cause of it? Is it human beings? No, that's too broad. While human beings might be necessary, they're not sufficient. You can have human beings around without a house being built. Is it log home builders or timber frame builders? These might be sufficient causes for a particular house, but they're not necessary. You can get a house without those specific kinds of builders. Instead, home builders, in general, seem to be the proper cause. Wherever a house is coming into existence, home builders of some kind are at work. And wherever home builders are at work, a house is coming into existence. Now, just as there are many kinds of homes and different kinds of home builders, yet one general proper cause for house building, the same logic applies to intelligence. Even though there are many types of intelligence, there has to be some general description of what all intelligent beings have in common. The one thing that's both necessary and sufficient for intelligence to arise. There may be further reasons why one being is more intelligent than another, but there must be some fundamental shared basis for intelligence being present at all. Just like there are many types of digestion, but all rely on common principles of physics and chemistry. So, what's the proper cause of intelligence? What exactly is it about an intelligent being that makes it intelligent? What's the minimum thing that always has to be there, and if present, suffices to produce understanding? Is it a human brain? Clearly not. Some animals have intelligence, sometimes at remarkable levels, yet they don't have human brains. Okay, what about a brain in general? Could that be the proper cause of intelligence, with the human brain as just a special case? That won't quite work either. Not every part of a brain is involved in thinking or understanding. It's not enough just to have brain tissue. Otherwise, every piece of brain matter would be cognitive, which we know isn't true. In fact, even being part of a brain seems unnecessary. If the type of biological material made a fundamental difference, then brains made of very different kinds of neurons and quite differently organized would exhibit very different cognitive powers. But we find the opposite. Octopuses, if that's the right plural, horses and ravens, for instance, all have neurons that differ in structure. Octopus neurons are large and often unipolar or bipolar, and many cephalopod neurons are unmyelinated, unlike vertebrate neurons. Vertebrate neurons are typically multipolar. Bird neurons are smaller and densely packed, yet their problem-solving abilities are surprisingly similar. We find even more pronounced differences in the organizations of the brains of these animals. A horse, like all mammals, has a layered neocortex, a 6-layered sheet covering the cerebral hemispheres, highly developed for sensory integration, motor planning, and higher cognition. Neurons are arranged in columnar patterns in the neocortex. An octopus's brain involves no neocortex at all. Its central brain surrounds the esophagus. It's shaped like a donut and contains large lobes specialized for vision and learning. 2/3 of its neurons are distributed in its arms, which have semi-autonomous nervous systems capable of local processing and decision-making. Birds also have no neocortex, but instead a structure called the pallium, which performs similar high-level functions but has a clustered organization rather than the layered cortical structure seen in mammals. It's as if being a brain or a part of a brain or having certain types of neurons or a certain species-specific neural architecture is irrelevant. With all those differences, we still get very similar results. Instead, all that seems to matter for cognition is that we have a system exhibiting one of the many types of cognitive organizations. And what is the general category of organizations that are cognitive? Such organizations are all neural networks. But wait, that's still not precise enough. Some parts of the brain, like the brain stem, are also highly organized as neural networks, but they control things like breathing, heart rate, and reflexes, not thought or understanding. So it's not just any neural network that counts, but only those with architectures belonging to a special set, the architectures specifically capable of cognitive functions. And beyond architecture, there's also adjustable parameters, things like synaptic strengths, neurotransmitter levels, receptor sensitivity, and neural excitability. Even a promising architecture won't generate thought if its parameters are off. Here's an apt analogy. A cognitive architecture is like a guitar, and the parameter settings are like its tuning. You can't make good music with an untuned guitar, and likewise, you can't generate cognition from a misaligned architecture. So, just as an in-tune guitar is the proper instrument for guitar playing, a properly adjusted cognitive architecture is the proper cause of thinking and understanding. Wherever we find real thinking and understanding, we find such a cause. And wherever we find such a cause at work, we find understanding. Notice how on this account, the proper cause of thinking and understanding is independent of the material substrate. It says you don't need a living brain or any particular material to house the right architecture. This idea, known as substrate independence, has been defended, though in different forms, by many prominent philosophers, including Hilary Putnam, Jerry Fodor, and David Chalmers. What matters is just this: a neural network with an architecture drawn from the right set. The architecture is capable of producing cognitive behavior, properly attuned or adjusted. Having thus isolated the proper cause of intelligence, we can now argue as follows. Premise 1. What's powered by any type of neural network, properly tuned for solving certain problems, possesses the proper cause of understanding, and thus truly understands. Premise 2. LLMs are powered by such neural networks. Witness the fact that their neural networks allow them to solve many of the same problems that the human mind solves. Therefore, LLMs truly understand. The final argument we'll consider on this side of our question was also advanced by Turing, and many others since. We can call it the argument from solipsism, or the argument based on the problem of other minds. It starts with a choice. Either a genuine intellect or mind can be detected, and its existence verified only by directly observing its own internal acts from within, or else it can also be detected and fully verified just by observing its external effects. Now, let's see what happens when we adopt each alternative. If we go with the first, that a true mind can only be detected and revealed by observing its own mental acts from within, then it follows, since each of us can only observe our own mind at work, that we can never be sure that anyone else actually has a mind of their own. We simply can't know that the people around us are truly like us, that they have minds inside them as we have our own, if verifying that requires experiencing their minds internally, just as they experience them. In other words, you can't know that I have a mind unless you can directly observe my thoughts the same way I observe them, that is, the same way you observe your own thoughts. But you can't observe my thoughts like that. So if that's the only way to verify a mind's existence, you can never be sure I actually have a mind like yours. For all you know, I might be a totally non-sentient robotic thing, no more aware than a toaster. And this isn't just about me, it applies to everyone you've ever met. So, if we insist on direct internal access as the only way to verify a mind, then each of us is stuck admitting the possibility that no minds exist except our own, a very sad and lonely view called solipsism. That first alternative, then, seems to trap us in a pretty unpleasant and unreasonable position, solipsism. But what about the second alternative? If we can be sure other minds exist just by looking at external behavior, the outward signs that minds produce, then solipsism is off the table. In this view, you know I have a mind because I speak like you do, show understanding on my face and in response to what you say, follow your instructions, and so on. Thanks to these outward signs, you're confident I have a mind, and that you're not alone in the world. That's a much more attractive and reasonable conclusion, don't you agree? Now here's the catch. If external behavior alone can reliably indicate the presence of a real mind, then logic demands we apply this rule to our large language models as well. Since these models show external behaviors that closely resemble human intelligence, speaking, responding, understanding, our rule tells us that these behaviors must come from a real mind inside them, one similar to our own. This argument can be summed up as follows. Either a real mind, capable of truly thinking and understanding, can be detected only by directly and interiorly observing its acts of thinking and understanding, or else that's not the case, and it's possible to be sure a real mind is present whenever the entity produces outwardly observable effects like those through which we human beings recognize minds in one another. The first alternative is unreasonable, since it forces us to accept the possibility of solipsism. Therefore, the second alternative must be accepted. We can be sure a real mind is present in any entity that produces outward effects like those we use to recognize minds in each other. But LLMs produce outward effects just like those through which we recognize minds in each other. Therefore, we can be sure there's a real mind in an LLM. As I said at the start of this video, none of these arguments actually prove their point, though some of them look pretty formidable and all are very interesting. My goal in the next video is to show exactly how each of these 10 arguments goes astray. See you there.